a country of contrast. The powerhouse of Latin America, just 1 year ago reeling from a drastic devaluation, today on the road to economic recovery, yet still tackling high crime in Brazil's major cities. This week commemorating an anniversary, controversial among Brazil's native people. Once a fishing village, now a major metropolis. Much has changed since Portuguese explorers arrived on Brazil's coast. The country is today the world's third largest democracy, teetering on the verge of becoming a developed nation, still struggling with social injustice from the past. I'm Debbie Doherty in Rio de Janeiro. Welcome to this special edition of Insight. As Brazil approaches the 5th-century milestone, not everyone here is convinced of the need to celebrate, least of all Brazil's native cultures. We paid a visit to the first residents of this region who greeted the Portuguese when they arrived on these shores. The Guarani people have lived in Brazil's rainforest for thousands of years and have asked for nothing more than to be left alone. 90-year-old Cacique leads this community of 350 Guarani located in Rio de Janeiro state. They form part of Brazil's largest Indian nation with 30,000 Guarani spanning 6 states.
The white man has taken everything from us, and we are suffering. And no one remembers what they've done ever since Pedro Cabral arrived and killed our ancestors.
Patacho Indian ancestors met Portuguese explorers when they landed on the northeastern beach of Porto Seguro. They and other Indians have denounced plans to celebrate Brazil's discovery, pointing out that many of their ancestors died in clashes. Others fell prey to disease brought by white settlers. Brazil's native population has in the past 5 centuries been reduced from several million to 325,000. The Yanomami used to live undisturbed in Brazil's Amazon region. Their land sits on one of the richest deposits of gold in South America. Since prospectors began exploiting Yanomami territory, this land has never been the same.
The Indians continue to have problems. The problem of surviving, creating an environment in which the Indians can thrive. That's the challenge for the government.
And Brazil's 1988 Constitution guarantees Indians the right to land traditionally held by their ancestors. More than half the native territory has been returned, but fire set by rangers to clear land for cattle continues to encroach on Indian territory.
We're making progress. We'll soon demarcate more Indian territories. It's a priority.
And this Guarani reservation is one of the protected areas. And one reason the Guarani culture has fared better than any other of Brazil's indigenous groups. The Guarani people have been able to maintain their culture largely because they refuse to marry non-natives. And they're united by a religion that dates back more than 2,000 years. Religious beliefs passed along through generations through song. These boys and girls account for half of this tribe. Like his father, this little boy will likely leave this village for work when he is older. One of the few men who never left, Cacique serves as chief and surrogate father. He says without opportunity, the future for Brazil's Guarani will be grim.
Look at these children we are trying to feed. And tell me, who is supposed to support them now? No one remembers us.
Native people have ranked among Brazil's poorest residents, hardest hit during the dark days of 1999. Brazil's economic collapse seemed inevitable little more than a year ago. Panicky investors sent billions of dollars out of the country. Facing economic ruin, the government let the currency float freely against the dollar in January, sending the real plunging to half its value. It was a low point in the economic crisis that began in Asia and worsened with the Russian meltdown. Brazil's choice appeared to be high inflation or recession. The country avoided both. Inflation stayed within the range promised under a $41 billion IMF bailout package. Central Bank President Arminio Fraga gets much of the credit. A protege of George Soros, Fraga reined in speculators. Despite a few glitches, the currency slowly strengthened. These adjustments, combined with President Fernando Henrique Cardoso's re-election, guaranteed the continuation of Brazil's open economy. To foreign investment now. Multinationals are pouring money into Brazil, but some Brazilians are having second thoughts about opening their markets to the world. When Brazilians go shopping these days, they notice more imported products on the shelves. Trade barriers began disappearing a decade ago, and Brazil's economic opening has gathered pace under President Fernando Henrique Cardoso.
Last year, we received about $27 billion in foreign direct investment in our economy. This is good. We need more technology, but the rest depends on ourselves.
Bouncing back from last year's chaotic devaluation, Brazil's economy has been bolstered by direct international investment. In the latest example, American company Best Foods paid $490 million for Arisco, a Brazilian food manufacturer. Tire makers like Fati have closed their doors in Argentina and moved some of their factories into Brazil.
We've chosen to move some of our factories north of the border and continue to produce in Brazil, to take advantage.
Take advantage of tax incentives and the devaluation of Brazil's currency, the real. Foreign investment is helping not only to plug Brazil's current account deficit, it is also helping to drive Brazilian companies to be more competitive. Brahma, Brazil's largest beer producer, used to have a tight lid on the market. But a flood of imports forced the company to become more aggressive. Brahma and Antarctica recently moved to merge their workforce to give the beer bottlers more than 70% of the market. Whatever they drink, many Brazilian consumers are wary of international companies.
The government should think of us first and invest here.
Por exemplo, o Brasil tinha mais aqui investir nas empresas.
We should invest in Brazilian companies so we're not so dependent on foreigners. We have to stop criticizing foreign investment. And we have to make sure that Brazilians can invest in Brazil's future and become partners.
Analysts say Latin America's largest economy is today doing better than anyone could have anticipated. The biggest worry now, whether Brazil's economy can continue to grow while avoiding the boom and bust pattern of the 1990s. Rio is a city of glitter. Here on Copacabana Beach, a place of relative affluence, with world-class hotels and luxury condominiums. It's like another world in the hills behind me, the shanty town, where this stretch is in clear view, but well out of reach to its residents. Residents of Rio de Janeiro's shanty towns have $1 million view. And in this hillside slum, Brazil's economic recovery is taking hold slowly, but very slowly. Here, the higher up you live, the worse off you are. These streets don't exist on a map. Trash is rarely retrieved. Electricity is jerry-rigged. From power lines to popsicles, everything is shared.
Slums in Rio, which make up about a fifth of the population there, have been marginalized from the institutional life of the city. So we do not find services in the slums. We do not find security in the slums. The slums were taken to be some odd kind of urban thing which would disappear one day, which would go away, which someone would remove them away, but somehow the slums have not been part of the city.
Thelma Matthias is one of 1 million residents living in Rio's slums. A single mother, she shares a bed with her 14-year-old daughter Natalia. Her son Bruno sleeps on the couch.
It is difficult. We poor have to fight against the wind, as they say. With 2 children in a place like this, it's not easy.
A social worker for 16 years, Thelma earns about $120 a month. Yet she counts herself among Brazil's privileged poor. Hers is among the 9 of 10 homes with a television, 7 of 10 with a refrigerator, an improvement from decades past. Yet her electric bills alone cost 1/4 her income. According to the World Bank, the world's wealthiest 10% own half this country's resources. And the poor, like the residents of the shanty town of Cantagalo, own just 1% of this country's wealth. Brazil's poorest 10% will soon receive slightly higher paychecks. The federal government raised the minimum monthly wage from the equivalent of $76 to $85 beginning next month.
I don't want to talk about it. It's shameful.
No comment. It's totally absurd.
However nominal the increase, Brazil's currency, the real, goes farther today than under the quadruple-digit inflation of years past.
Lately, there was an improvement, yes, mainly due to the fact that inflation is a very perverse kind of tax, which is much heavier on the poor than on the middle class or on the rich.
Yet President Cardoso concedes there is much work to be done.
So our problem is much more social problem than economic problem. We have injustice. I used to say that we are no more an underdeveloped country, but a developing country, but unjust.
A better future for her son and daughter is what this mother yearns for. Tama's children's achievements are her biggest joy. Some Bruno's jiu-jitsu medals line the wall. Natalia made the cover of the newspaper during Carnival. And in the corner of the living room, a costume Tama wore in the past parade.
Não chorar não, nem pensar. Alegria. Don't even think about crying. Happiness, that's Carnival.
It is during Carnival Tama mingles with the rich who live on Rio's shiny beachfront, if only for a few days a year. Brazil is a country of paradox. Its people on one hand are warm and hospitable, but society is shockingly violent. With the second highest number of murders in the world, Brazil has gained notoriety as a violent society. In Rio de Janeiro alone, nearly 6,000 people were murdered last year. More than 45,000 cars were stolen. Police say they're defending society and themselves in an urban war, a war in which Rio's police killed 371 civilians. Police officers often find themselves in life-or-death situations while on routine duty. The event you're about to see is very graphic. Midday in a busy downtown square of Rio de Janeiro. A TV Global cameraman captures this scene. The police officer gets a tip that these men sitting on the motorcycle to the right have robbed a bank. The officer walks over, discovers one man is armed, and then kills them both. July 1998. The officer shows the gun carried by the suspect. He says he feared for his life.
He had a gun under his belt. He went to draw it and I shot him. I was just faster.
It was confirmed later the dead men robbed the bank. Despite dangerous daily responsibilities, human rights groups say police use of force is sometimes excessive. The residents of Brigada Geral still speak of the night when a group of policemen came into their slum in Rio and killed 21 people, August 1993. Residents say the police returned to avenge the deaths of 4 officers killed by drug dealers in this neighborhood the night before. After an investigation, 29 of 33 officers involved were fired.
The percentage of people involved in crime in Rio is much higher than in other places, so traditional law enforcement cannot be applied here.
Many Brazilians are wary of police at a time they need the most protection. In Brazil's major cities, drug dealers have taken over hundreds of neighborhoods.
The government wants the police to find a solution to our problems, but the police have no solution. All they know is how to kill. No. I don't feel protected or safe. I walk down the streets because I have no choice.
Along the streets of Rio, you'll be hard-pressed to find anyone with a kind word about the police. In the latest salvo fired, Rio State Security Coordinator Luis Eduardo Suarez told the press, the rotten side of Rio's police forces extorts, kills, and tortures. 3 days later, Rio's Governor Anthony Garotinho fired Suarez on live TV. Because of Suarez's dismissal, police refused to speak with us on camera.
The police are actually being efficient because they're protecting the elite and the state, so there is no problem.
Police recruits at this national academy train for one of the toughest jobs in the country, one that offers little financial reward.
Society pays the minimum wage. We give them a badge and a gun. It's almost as if we expect police to engage in other activities.
Administrator ads, low pay, and high stress continue to push many police toward violence. This center town in Rios Hillside is one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in all of Brazil. Shootouts are a regular occurrence, most related to drug trafficking. And the police who patrol these streets say they're outgunned by the criminals and they risk their lives every day. And to get this haul of drugs, police had to face this arsenal of weapons used by drug dealers. It is one reason police defend their aggressive tactics. Meantime, Brazil remains a dangerous place, even for the person in charge of security. Within a week after being fired, Luis Eduardo Suarez fled Rio under death threats. He is today living in an undisclosed location in the United States. Brazil is the world's fifth largest country geographically, and the Amazon region accounts for 1/3 of its territory. Well, many thought its resources were inexhaustible, and in the 1970s and 80s, vast stretches of the forest were torched. But international condemnation has since had a strong influence on Brazil's government policies. CNN's Gary Stryker has this report.
In this reserve in the central Amazon, the forest, rivers, and wildlife are protected by law. And so are the people who live here and their way of life. Mamirawa is part of a network of connected reserves, the world's largest protected block of rainforest, covering more than 22,000 square miles, an area larger than Costa Rica. But Mamirawa has a special status for another reason as the first sustainable development reserve in Brazil, a pioneering experiment in harmonizing nature conservation with human needs.
Mamirawa has been a really good situation. The protection of the area has never been so good. The fish stocks have never been so high, and the situation of the locals, using any standard of comparison, is far better than it was 5 years ago.
Conservationists say most nature reserves in Brazil exist only on paper. Serious measures to protect reserves are often stalled by the problem of removing people living inside them. In contrast, this reserve was founded on the basis that people living here, some 20,000 of them in dozens of villages, would not only be allowed to stay, but would in fact play major roles in managing it and protecting its natural resources. This fisherman believes the plan is working. Without it, he says, all the fish would be gone. In a project sponsored in part by the New York-based Wildlife Conservation Society, scientists work with these people to find ways to conserve breeding stocks of fish and other harvested wildlife. As they've done this, harvests have actually increased, and marketing cooperatives get higher prices and more income for the villages. There are new sources of earnings, like this ecotourism lodge, and improvements to agriculture and social welfare. As they benefit, people take responsibility for enforcing conservation laws, with volunteer guards patrolling the reserve, reporting violations to the authorities.
Because they are also protecting their natural resources, their economy, their day-to-day quality of life.
Without this participation by local people, officials say, it would be almost impossible for the government to provide enough money and armed guards to protect this vast reserve. Against all the growing threats to the Amazon rainforest, uncontrolled logging and fires, deforestation for agriculture and ranching, Mamirawa is a large protected reserve where destruction has stopped. And it could be a model for others to follow.
If Brazil wants to increase the amount of protected areas in the Amazon, it has to go through a system which is like Manila, involving local people.
In other words, in saving the Amazon, local people are not the problem, but the solution.
When we come back, we'll travel up Brazil's coast and visit some Grammy-winning musicians who look across the Atlantic to Africa for their inspiration. Welcome back. I'm Deborah Doherty in Rio de Janeiro. This view has inspired the music of bossa nova and samba, the music of an optimistic people. And this country has produced some of the world's greatest musicians. A good many from Bahia, the place where Brazil was born. They call it Africa in Brazil. In their long journey from West Africa to the New World, many of Brazil's more than 1 million slaves first saw South America at Salvador, Brazil's first capital, a capital lined with colonial mansions and Catholic churches. And more than any other region, the inhabitants of Bahia have retained their heritage. Even now, 4 of 5 Salvadorans trace their ancestry to Africa. The white turban and dress worn by Bahian women recalls a West African Yoruban tradition. The language is Portuguese, the culture is African.
They were co-colonizers, co-creators of Brazil. And that's the way I see them or us, because I'm partly black too. Consequently, our music is just as black.
Local bands called Local Afros pound their way through Salvador's streets.
Music was based on the Afro-inherited things that we have, rhythms, especially because of the religion brought from the Yoruba area in Nigeria and Niamey. When they reproduced a lot of drumming and chanting and that sort of thing, and that kind of spread, over the city of Salvador.
Their rhythm, called approche, is both the sound of the street festival and the pulse of the Afro-Brazilian religion called candomblé. For many in this poor corner of Brazil, music is an escape from the reality of everyday life. Yet poverty has inspired some of Bahia's greatest musicians. Virginia Rodriguez's haunting voice, backed by powerful percussion in Noite de Temporal, made her one of world music's best-selling performers last year. Her journey began in Salvador's slums.
De uma certa forma, fazer o que você quer.
Being poor is really difficult. You can't do what you want. You can't even study music without means. When you're still in Brazil, music classes are a luxury. The original name of Salvador referred to its being on the Day of All the Saints, and this city has lived up to that appellation. For musically, there are many saints watching over Bahia, including Oshawa, the African goddess of the sea. The music of Bahia. 500 years of history has spawned a rich culture, blending African, Indian, and European influences. History has also left a deep divide between Brazil's haves and have-nots. And as its leaders look to the future, they face the challenge of guiding Latin America's largest country to its dazzling potential. I'm Deborah Doherty in Rio de Janeiro. Thanks for joining us.